Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Living Astrology with Janet. It's time to grab your cup of coffee or your tea, sit back and relax while we chat about what is happening in the stars above for the weekend. Happy Friday to everyone. The weeks are flying by, guys. It's like almost the end of August. Well, it's mid August today, mid August. Time flies when you're having fun. Uh, this morning, we are going to be doing a couple of deep dives. I think it's a really good time for us to look at how some of these configurations that we've been talking about, the minor grand trine, the kite configuration, and how they all are working together to create this reform on our planet, right? And it's pretty obvious here in the US what it is doing to us. I'm not as aware of how it impacts the rest of the world, but you can guarantee that if it's impacting us, it's impacting everybody. So, no matter where you're listening to me from, it may be happening in your own part of the world. And what we're seeing is the sort of rebound effect of years of power and power being corrupted, and that impact has created this world that is that we really can't uphold. It is not sustainable. And now, as we're moving into this time period where Pluto is out of bounds or will be out of bounds, meaning he has his extreme expression of empowerment and of transformation, right? The whole death and rebirth thing that goes on with Pluto. We are going to see, kind of this crescendo of things that are happening that represent an old power paradigm, and we're going to be watching it then get rebounded as people who are the ones that are really going to become the ones in power, empowered, strike back. Right, it's like watching a Star Wars movie, right? The Empire Strikes Back, or the any of those kinds of stories that we hear where you're being downtrodden or you're being used and abused, and then they rise up and they fight back, right? And they end up creating a new world, right? A new way of being. And it's like we're living this myth right now, this very mythic time of, like the great stories of trial and sacrifice and all of that. We're living it today, right? If we look back, 20 years from now, and we look back, we'll see. And, even long after we're gone, history, her story will remember this period of time when the entire world changed, right? The entire paradigm changed. So, today, what it is we're going to be doing is talking about the Phoenix of Reform. That's the bulk of the show. I'm going to start that part a little bit later because people come in, they kind of come in a little bit later. But that's not all that we have going on today. We also have a very interesting moon tomorrow as she begins her last transit through, or her last phase of her transit through Taurus, and moves into Gemini. So as soon as she moves into Gemini early tomorrow morning, then and noon for those of you on the East Coast, then she begins to impact the minor grand trine that is between Uranus, Pluto, and the Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries. So remember, we've had Mars be the catalyst for this. We've had Mars be the catalyst for the kite formation, and now now Mars typically brings the power of the punch, right? The very masculine, assertive, action oriented energy. Now the moon, very feminine, coming in behind that and really kind of cleaning up what it is that Mars began. And we'll see how that has impact on us. And then as well today, as we are talking about the moon, she is also at a point in her transit with the sun that we call the crisis of consciousness. This is the part of her journey after the new moon. So we've had the new moon, we had the first quarter square, which is called the crisis of action, and then we've had the full moon, And now we have the third quarter, which is called the crisis of consciousness. And it creates this impact on us of changing our thought processes, our minds, our beliefs, etc. So we'll talk about that. And then, as well, on Sunday, we have the beginning of the new Human Design Week, where we move into a week of commitment and passion. It's one of my favorite weeks of the year. And then we will dive into our Pluto in out of bounds territory, the next part of the series that we've been talking about in Pluto. So I'd like to welcome everybody this morning. Thank you for joining me. Lo, it's good to see you out there this morning. Lo and I just had a Facebook anniversary of sorts, right? 5 years, I think it said, Lo, since we became friends. That's like incredible, right? 5 years. Teddy, good morning to you. And the housewarming gift that's sitting outside because I don't know where to put it. I have no idea. But I do. I was talking to Heather about it yesterday. It's a beautiful lantern, and you can fit a pillar sized candle inside of it, and it's gorgeous. I just don't know what I'm going to do with it, but keep listening. Amy D, good morning to you. And Joan Durchie, good morning to you. And anybody else who's back there behind the scenes that I don't see, it is great to have you with us. So I want to start with a couple of announcements this morning, and then I'll probably announce them again. So don't think I know I'm going to repeat myself, but that's just because the way the flow of the audience goes. First of all, unbelievably, it is time for the pre-sale of the 2026-2027 Energy Almanac. Wow. And it has been crazy. I spent all day yesterday on the third round of edits for the book and found some things that needed to be changed. So it's a good thing we do like several edits before it goes to print. And the pre-sale begins September 1st through the 11th. The books are delivered in November. And remember, this year we're moving to the astrological year. So the book itself is from March until March. And when you purchase the book, you also get access, and everybody gets access to this free, the digital copy of the January, February, and the first third of 2/3 of March by uh, digital PDF format. And then, of course, there are always deals. This year, when you buy a bundle, you get access to the Astrology of 2026 or Astro Design of 2026 that Tam and I are going to do. You guys usually pay for that. This year, you're getting it with your purchase of the Energy Almanac. Second announcement, next Wednesday, the 20th, we are doing the Autumn Eclipses webinar. And let me see if I can post the link here, if it will still do that. Control V. Control V? No. Paste. Yes. There we go. There's the link for you to purchase the webinar. It's $22. We'll be talking about the very powerful eclipses September 7th and 29th. One, a blood moon lunar eclipse, and the other, a new moon eclipse. It is the new moon that is kind of an interesting. Actually, both of them are very interesting in the way that they play out. So I look forward to that. At $22, you can't beat it. Join me and Tam on the 20th at noon. If you purchase and you cannot attend, you still get the recording and the notes and the slides and all of the things that we provide during the talk. And third announcement of the day, I have been graced with the opportunity to speak at an upcoming summit called She Rises. And it is starting September 15th through the 19th. And I am teaching a master class during this particular summit. And I will be posting that information out for you probably later today. They promised us the links and everything today. And attending, you get access to a lot of people who are doing some really wonderful classes, either that are related to business, related to life in general, like me. I'm talking about general, like how you are here to live your life, and also wellness and health. So you can choose who it is that you want to listen to. And there are two levels. There's the free level, and then there's a $97 VIP level that gives you access to more freebies, gifts, and things like that, discounts and things. So be watching for that. And now I can dive into the astrology of the day of the weekend. Yes, happy rainy Friday. It is interesting because here I am in a new house, which is an RV, and it's good to have heavy rains like this during this period of time because we can find any of the leaks. And our front door, happens to have a leak. Woo! It's not bad. It's coming onto the steps of the like down the front of the door. So it's a seal, obviously, that needs to be replaced. But thankfully, we can see that now and not find that out in, October when it's cold and rainy and wet instead of warm and rainy. So thankful for small things, right? Okay, so today let's start with the moon. So we haven't talked much about the moon lately, but here she is. She's playing a major role. When I was looking at the calendar for today, or not for today, but for tomorrow, there was this long list of aspects that she was making to other planets. And then what I noticed was she was triggering up the minor grand trine. So, two big things happening with the moon then this weekend. One, we reached the crisis of consciousness point, and otherwise known as the last quarter moon, right? And then the number of contacts that she makes as she moves out of Taurus and into Gemini triggers off the minor grand trine. So I'm actually going to share my screen here as we jump into the chat about this. Good morning to those of you who are showing up that I didn't see at first, so I'll come back and say hi. So I put together a chart in the mornings because I just think sometimes it's good to have it visually, right? So that you can kind of connect visually to what's happening. So tomorrow's moon in late Taurus, so that'll be early in the morning up until about 9 a.m. Pacific time and about noon for those of you on the East Coast. And this is the day that she'll begin the last quarter square to the sun. And it's this final square of the lunation cycle, right? The one that began with the new moon back in early or late July. And the final square is one where we face a sort of crisis in our consciousness. Like if you set some powerful intentions with that new moon, actually, the new moon, I think, was on August. No, it's in July. Um, if you set some powerful intentions, then you are kind of seeing the culmination or the coming culmination of those intentions. But what happens at the quarters, the first quarter is one where we have to choose an action. We actually have to decide to step forward toward that intention. Like we can't just sit on our laurels, oh, hey, universe, we want to manifest XYZ, but then do nothing about it, right? So that's the first crisis point. And usually we're presented with some kind of challenge, a block, maybe a fear, some kind of limitation. Then we get to the full moon. The light shines very brightly on what it is that is standing in our way. And then we ultimately realize now, when we get to the last quarter square, that it's all along been something going on in our subconscious mind, perhaps, or a fear or block or limitation in our beliefs, something, internal that we need to shift in order to create the manifestation or to get closer to manifesting the intention. So we've reached this moment then tomorrow of inner reckoning, where what we did this last lunar cycle, at the beginning of this cycle, reveals to us something about our own consciousness or our own beliefs, right? And our own limitations, maybe how it is that we're being, self-sabotaging, or how we're not being our own best friends, that type of thing. So, what creative impulse, Leo style, because it was a Leo new moon, is now maturing into this real world manifestation? And maybe it's coming in Taurian form because the moon is actually in Taurus, and Taurus is tangible, it's grounded, it's earthy, right? It's real, right? It has feet, right? It has it has some kind of meat on its bones, right? And the moon brings the awareness of what we must complete in order to harvest the benefits of the intention that we set. And also involved in that might be some kind of thing that we need to surrender in order to make that happen. And typically, when I say surrender, I mean to let go of some kind of old belief system, something that is standing in the way. Taurus holds tightly, remember, it's a fixed earth sign. And Leo burns brightly. That's where the new moon was, right? Those intentions that we set were leonine, right? Or in the Leo area of your chart. And so we are coming to this point in the square where there feels like there's this tension between security and, being secure, being safe, and our sovereignty, how we want to express our individuality in the world. And it's also a square and a tension between staying grounded, but also answering the call, to shine more brightly and boldly in your own world, in your own way. And just as you're sitting with that, right, all of that, then the moon moves into Gemini. So here she is here on Saturday at the last degrees of Taurus. That's this little red line. Oh, I always forget you can't see my cursor, and that's a shame. But if you look toward the top of the chart, you see a little red dashed line, and outside of it, it says moon on Saturday. It says moon on Sat, but that's Saturday. Not not Saturn this time, but Saturday. And she's at these, last degrees of Taurus. And then at noon, East Coast time, she moves on into Gemini. And now she's going to sit on top of the planet Uranus. And the moon begins then to light up this configuration called the minor grand trine, right? We've been talking about this a lot because this is a configuration that is active through 2028, right? It's a long-term transit, and it will, change form a bit through those next few years, but it's activating this new concept of flow, right? What is the flow of the energy representing to us? So now suddenly, as the moon moves into Gemini, these outer planets become interconnected with, the heart and soul of who we are, the moon, right? And this is where the energy shifts from that crisis energy today or today, tomorrow of consciousness to possibility, right? Everything starts to be flowing in a different way. So what begins as tension opens up to activation. And because the Gemini moon sets off this minor grand trine, it's that's been quietly humming in the background, right? It's been there. Um, and it's in the background of everyone's chart. You're all feeling the effects of this. Then, it's creating some change. So let's unpack all of the things that are happening here with the moon. Look at this. She'll sit in a conjunction to Uranus, which means she will then be in a sextile to Saturn and Neptune, which are over to the upper right side. You'll see Saturn and Neptune written in. And then they're sitting in a sextile to Pluto, and the moon conjunct Uranus is also in a trine to Pluto. So Pluto, Saturn and Neptune, Uranus and the moon are all interconnected tomorrow, right? Tomorrow. So this is this moon's dance with the sky gods. All of these outer planets are kind of the sky gods, right? And the energy of this is igniting this minor grand trine. And remember, some of these very planets, all three of these or four of these planets, were also in the Kite that is activated from August 1st through 15th today. So we also have this tension, that a bit of that tension that's created by the Kite, which we're going to go into a little bit more here shortly. So once in Gemini, the moon is creating that sextile to the Saturn Neptune, the trine to Pluto, and the conjunction of the moon to Uranus. This awakens these mental sparks. Remember, this is a air and fire grand trine or minor grand trine. And some surprising insights may, develop within us during this weekend. Expect maybe intuitive downloads. I'm needing that right away. Inspired conversations with people perhaps that you are interacting with over the weekend, or maybe a reversal in how you perceive something. There's a lot of perceptions that we have about what's happening, what's not happening, what should happen, that we need to work with. And this is future oriented astrology here, because this is kind of taking us in a new direction, especially rewiring how we think in real time. And that's air, right? The fundamental air age that we are in. And then the moon trining Aquarius, or trining Pluto in Aquarius, is an air trine of radical release. That is what Pluto's job is, and that is what Pluto is bringing us here. Think of this as a channel that's really an opening for transformation through intelligence, right? Using your mind intellectually in a positive way. You might not have all the words yet to put to what it is that's transforming, but your soul knows, and your soul is working on it for you on your behalf, right? You're interacting with the inner you, and that is being expressed in the outer world. And then finally, the moon is also going to be sextiling Pluto, or Mercury over here. I didn't add this part of it, but on the left side of the chart over here in Leo, the moon is also sextiling Mercury, who is no longer retrograde. So now we have some new information coming in. We have new ideas being birthed. We have new opportunities to speak, perhaps, and maybe creating a fast current of clarity and courage right in us to be able to say what must be said, and to act with grace under pressure. In other words, the moon is now the spark that lights up the kite, or the final parts of the kite. It lights up this grand, minor grand trine, and it calls us to participate in the collective reform. Reform is on its way through mental and emotional intelligence, right? Being really aware of your emotional self, your EQ, and your intelligence, your IQ. And the bigger invitation in all of this, then, for us is, what really begins as this personal feeling of tension, is the crisis of consciousness, let's call it again, turns into this portal of potential, right? Through the crisis, through, how it is, if we didn't have squares and, tension filled aspects, we would really stay kind of stuck. We wouldn't really grow much. So it's these times like this that create this energy that pushes us, propels us forward. And, Pluto also being out of bounds, or coming very close to out of bounds, um, reminds us that transformation is not optional. This isn't optional, right? This is a have to, right? In the context of the collective. And this weekend's moon reminds us that our participation personally in this transformation is essential, right? Your part is important. Everybody has an important role. And whether that's through words, ideas, teaching, relationships, or other acts of courage, you are part of the reform. Reform is coming to the planet. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and see how people are doing. How about questions? Anything going on? Let's talk about that. Kiki, good morning to you. Alana, good morning to you. Judy, good morning to you. Miss Stell, good morning to you. Jana, happy Friday to you as well. J-Lo says, yes. Right? I love that. Yes. So tell me, how are you feeling about all of this, right? It's kind of big, and it's important. In the, backdrop of things, some days, that there's not a lot going on, right? We don't feel like there's a lot going on. Those are the days when there's more internal shifting happening. And then, that might be followed by the next day with something big in the headlines, right? Out in the outer world, or something big that happens in your life, something that crashes and burns in your life that, calls you to transform. So you're all a part of this, every one of you in different ways. So the way to really unpack all of this for you personally is to have maybe an astrology reading where we can look at that grand trine, the minor grand trine, and see what's happening. Look at what the kite configuration did in your chart in terms of splitting the grand trine in half and making it more difficult to bring those parts together. So if you need to have that done, please hit me up and let's chat. Now, and also if you have any questions, that I can answer now, go ahead and put those in the chat. Next, I want to share my screen because on Sunday we have the new Human Design Week. And, the sun and earth are moving into two of my favorite gates, which I love these two gates. And I'm not sure because it's kind of, I'm a glutton for punishment because I have both of those gates defined. But in the meantime, I kind of like to share it because it's so important, I think, in the grand scheme of things. So as you're looking at this chart here, um, what you're seeing is the human design chart, and I've highlighted in blue the gates of the sun. The 29 is where the sun will be, and the earth is where the in the solar plexus at the gate 30, also in blue. And the 29 is called the gate of commitment, and in the earth, this is the gate of passion and or desire. In old human design language, it was the gate of desire. And we think of the gate 29 as a gate of saying yes. And we think of the gate 30 as following your heart, right? Doing what it is that feels best for you. And that's an important step for all of us as humans, right? We're not, we somehow get the messaging when we're young that it's selfish to do what it is that you want to do. But that's not true because in the human design context, we see that you are definitely designed to say yes to the things that you are passionate about, that your heart is involved with, that are good for you, that make you feel good. And this pairing of the gate 29 and the 30 is pretty fiery. It's emotional, it's transformational, and it activates the solar plexus, our emotional field, and the sacral center, which is the action oriented center. What am I going to do, or who do I want to be in all of this? And it invites us into this deeper emotional experience through what we commit to, what we say yes to, right? So the sun in the gate 29 in the gene keys. Now I'm going to talk about the shadow, gift, and the siddhi. It's the shadow of half-heartedness. It is the gift of devotion and or commitment, excuse me, and it is the siddhi of devotion. So, what we have in as we look through the shadows here is this pathway from half-heartedness to devotion through saying yes or committing to the right things for you, right? Not for someone else, not for everybody else, but for you, right? Because then it is good for everybody else. So this is a gate that is around really about persevering through challenges by keeping an aligned commitment, right? Keeping true to what it is you said yes to. And when the sun moves through this gate 29 here on the sacral center, it asks a crucial question. What do you really want to say yes to? Not what did you say yes to or what do you feel like you have to say yes to, but what do you really want to say yes to? Okay. This isn't about saying yes to everything either, right? This is not taking on everything because then you're so scattered that you can't really express your passion, which is the goal of the earth, right? It's about saying a sacral yes. This is a full body yes to the right things and then not quitting when it gets tough, right? When it gets hard. Because gate 29 teaches us to honor our inner truth and to stay the course when the commitment is rooted in purpose, not pressure, right? You have to be committed in purpose because if you're pressured to say yes, it's a different outcome. It leads off to half-heartedness, where when you're rooted in purpose, even when you come up to against a challenge, you're willing to work through it, right? You're willing to persevere. So here are a couple of things that you might notice this next week. And by the way, this is the week beginning the 17th on Sunday through the 22nd next Friday. Then we'll birth a new human design week after that. So you might notice a desire to pull back from things that you never fully committed to. If you were not fully committed to it, the best course of action is to retreat out of it, right? Make your apologies, make your exit, right? To say, I made a mistake. I thought this was what I was committed to. And it turns out that's not true for me. You might come up against opportunities to devote yourself more fully to a person, a path, a project, right? To what are you all in for? And you might also have the realization that overcommitting is draining your life force and is something that you need to course correct quickly. Right? There's just too much out there calling and, clawing at you, and you need to stop that, right? Because it's causing energy leaks for you. The wisdom of the gate 29, which is again on the sacral center here, colored in pink, is to choose well. And choosing well is when you follow your type and your strategy. And in human design, there are 5 types, and each type has its own strategy, right? The generators have this responding to the outer world, right? That if it's inside, it's not the right thing for you to respond to. Manifesting generators, same thing, only additionally, they have to inform people who will be impacted by their decisions before they jump. If you are a projector, you're following the invitations that life is presenting you or that people are presenting you and saying yes when it is something that really feels like it's aligned with your truth. If you are a manifester, well, you're a creator being, right? You can say yes and then change your mind, right? If it turns out that's not the right correction, but you also need to inform others before you choose what you're doing, before you do it. You can choose, but you got to let people know, hey, I'm changing course. This is who I'm going to be now, or this is what I'm going to do now. And finally, the reflectors, your decision making is very much slowed down. It's very much tied to the moon and its 28-day transit, right? So you need to really sit with something for a good deal of time before you really understand whether it is correct for you or not. Reflectors are the rarest types. There's only about 1% of the population out there that are reflectors. So we don't come across them very often. But if you're a projector or if you are a reflector, then you need to slow down that decision making, and saying yes can't be, this hurried thing. Okay. Now let's look at Earth in the gate 30, because the 30 is on the emotional center. So it tells you it has to do with how you feel, right? How does this feel in my body? How does this feel in my consciousness? And in the shadow energy of the gate 30, it's desire. And desire here is, those things that we want so badly, but that we're really not willing to take the action steps to. So they kind of take us nowhere. And then in the gift, it's lightness, right? Holding those desires lightly until you have that strategy that clicks in that tells you that's the right thing to say yes to. And in the highest expression, it is rapture. An interesting word these days. Rapture, such joy, right? Um, such a feeling of joyfulness and bliss within, because you chose something that really makes you happy. Gate 30 is emotional and it's intense. And when this gate is defined, it's a red flag gate, which means it amps up the energy. So the energy of the week is amped up, and it brings emotional pressure to the surface. It starts to feel like, oh, I've got to do this. And is this the right thing for me or not? Right? Is this just emotional pressure? Is it all within? If so, the generators and manifesting generators don't take action yet until you're matching something out in the world. So you may find yourself next week feeling this deep longing or yearning for something, for change, for connection, for meaning. Don't be surprised. Riding emotional waves that are kind of linked to what you don't have yet, right? the highs and the lows of that. Awakening to your heart's true desires. That would be the highest for the week, right? But struggling with the timing, right? Timing. Sometimes the timing is not in your hands. And the gift here isn't to suppress your desire. So I don't want you to squelch it or, swallow it down, but to hold it lightly, right? To Gate 30 teaches us to ride the wave, whatever it is that we're feeling, the waves of passion, without gripping onto the outcome. And when we do, we find such joy at the end in this present moment because we're expressing our passion. And that means this week, the Sun Earth axis is about devotion and desire, and that equaling sacred discipline, having the discipline to follow your type and your strategy, right? To take the appropriate steps, to say yes to the right things. And the polarity creates this beautiful tension for us between committed action and emotional longing. So we're here to honor what we say yes to and mean it, right? Mean it. And let desire inform the direction, right? But not overpower this present moment. Allow the emotional truth to kind of refine your devotion to your passion, not distract from it. That's key, right? But it's also something that's a little tricky for us as humans, right? We get that feeling it's almost overwhelming. So it's a powerful moment next week for us to um, hold a vision, right? The vision of our higher self. It's a powerful week for entrepreneurs who need to, take those next steps, for creative people, for healers. The key is to stay grounded in clarity and trust that you're doing the right things, that you're following your passion, and to move forward with heart-centered stamina. The 29 commitment is steeped in perseverance and determination. And from the gene keys, the gate 29 or the gene key 29 is a devotion, right? True devotion isn't blind. It's sacred discipline where you're walking the path with an open-hearted endurance, right? The ability to stay that course. And with the gate 30 or gene key 30, lightness, right? When we stop trying to control the outcome, the feeling of joyfulness and rapture rises, right? The pure joy of being alive in the longing, right? The I want, bringing such joy to your heart. So, together, this is a week where we're softening a bit into that controlled, I gotta have this, I've gotta do this, into a trust fall with life, right? Leaning back and just saying, okay, catch me. And it shows us that when we commit with heart and with that devotion, that level of devotion, that life will meet us, with beauty, and even in the unknown, like what's coming next, I don't know, but I'm willing and ready to accept what's coming. Right. All right. So I'm gonna stop sharing this one. Take a look and see how everybody's feeling out there. Um, you had an astro chart, not human design. Um, Hopefully it changed because I didn't go back to look. I usually do, and I did not. My bad. So, Karen, I said yes to something, and I am thinking it wasn't the right thing. Pluto is in your gate 29. So, the biggest transformation in your life, Karen, is literally about what you say yes to, what you devote yourself to, what you commit to. So, important life journey for you is really recognizing what it is that's correct for you to say yes to. And if you need, more clarity on that, then let's do a human design reading for you and see what that is. Tom, good morning to you. Better late than not. It is very true. It's good to have you with us. Okay, so now let's get into the meat and potatoes. Now, I'm going to preface this a little bit today because, you know, y- I I live in the USA, and right now the USA is still in the Pluto return. right? Pluto, we give it a 15-degree orb on either side. So we've been in this return for a while. And so it's really easy for me to pick out, what's happening here, with the different players in the government and with the different things that are happening. So please don't think I'm, just, only facing, USA stuff. It just happens to be the best way for me to show you what's happening at the moment. So now I want to add a different chart to the stage here. And here is the chart of the kite that formed that we were talking about from August 1st to the 15th, so today. And we still have Mars kind of activating this kite, but I put this over the USA Sibley chart. Right. So the chart that you're looking at here is the chart of the United States of America. It is the chart for the 4th of July, 1776 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And this was a time, when the Declaration of Independence was being signed and all of that, right? So there was this like congressional or continental Congress, I believe, that had come together, and this is the chart of the birth of the USA, right? So I've drawn in the kite and how the kite played out in the chart of America. Because some of the actions that have been taken since the full moon, because remember the day of the full moon, August 9th, that was the day that the height of the kite configuration was activated. The height of it, right? The most intense piece. And it was just after that full moon when Trump declared that there was an emergency in Washington, D.C., and he needed to send the National Guard military units into an American city to kind of take over the police force. All right, keep that in your mind. All right. So let's look at the overview of the kite configuration once more because this was a big deal. First, we had Mars in Libra at 1 degree, 0 degrees Libra here in the beginning of the kite. We call this the apex, right, of the kite. We had Saturn and Neptune in Aries. That would be where the top part of the kite is, where it's up in the sky. And then we had Uranus and Gemini on the right side there. You'll see Uranus. And on the left side, in a trine to Pluto in Aquarius. So this forms this grand air trine. You can see that from Mars in Libra to Pluto in Aquarius and over to Uranus in Gemini. And a sextile base between Saturn and Neptune in Aries and Uranus in Gemini, and Saturn and Neptune in Aries to Pluto in Aquarius. And with Mars at the tail of the kite, you have an opposition, right, pulling in two different directions to Saturn and Neptune in Aries, right? And in the chart of the United States, that puts it on the angles of the midheaven and the nadir. And anytime a configuration sets up like this, where it's on the angles of a chart, whether a nation or a person, it is highly activated, right? It brings it all out. Some people, you guys might have this and it's more subtle, but this in the chart of the United States was like blaring, right? Blaring. And this is an incredibly powerful and volatile configuration, especially layered on top of the USA's natal moon, which you can see here, also in Aquarius. And it's at 27 Aquarius, which puts it in a semi-sextile to the USA Pluto at 27 Capricorn. And this really deals with the nation's security, structure, and leadership. So it brings those components all together in this chart. Now, if we interpret this kite in the context of the US power and Trump's actions just after the full moon, um, we see that he used the National Guard as a way to override District of Columbia's local control, which is such a Pluto in Aquarius move. Power over the collective, right? Power over the collective. And then weaponized by Mars in Libra, which should have been creating this balancing and harmony, but Mars in Libra, not very powerful, not very happy, So he reverts to the old power structure. Let me grab power and control because I don't know how to do it with equality, with grace and harmony and peace. I don't know how to do it that way. So I'm going to grab for power. And it is, in a way, militarized justice, right? And aggressive enforcement that masked as trying to restore balance or restore peace or restore some kind of harmony. Totally not the truth, though. So how here's how all of these planetary players played out in this situation. Mars and Libra, assertive, militarized justice, acting under the guise of legality or balance or keeping the peace, right? But it's Mars, so it's forceful. And in this case, he used force to maintain control or to distract us from the Epstein files. There's also that whole piece. Then Pluto in an Aquarius, which is really still, if you look at Pluto in Aquarius, he's at 2 degrees. He's within orb of the natal Pluto. And that means we're still impacted by that Pluto return for the United States. And this is the core wound, the people's voice, Aquarius, the moon in a nation's chart represents the people, the heart of the nation, right? And in Aquarius, it's the people power, right? And it's being manipulated or pressured by authoritarian power in this case. And this highlights the deep psychological and generational shifts in how collective power is handled and resisted. And how did we get to where we are? And how do we get out of that? Right. And Uranus in Gemini, which is disruption through information, through media, through communication, through social media and technology and all those different types of things. It also signals digital uprisings where our youth led movements, right? They're so good at TikTok and they're so good at some of that, social media that like it just boggles my mind, right? How the youth use those things so well. And I struggle with it a little. And how this creates potential flashpoints for rebellion or for the truth to be exposed, right? And really the distraction of the military moving into these American cities, potentially others, because he said, Chicago, you're next, Oakland, California, you're next, and, right? Um, are distractions and disruptions. And these are like triggers. Those actions are triggers to people power, right? Being used, coming to the surface. And Saturn and Neptune in Aries, they are boundaries dissolving in the name of new leadership, right? Draining the swamp and creating new leaders that are as swampy as they were before. Or ideological reform. Let's change the thought processes. And it also reads as blurred lines between the law, Saturn, and fantasy and illusion through Neptune, right? Let me glimmer, right? And show you glimmers of things, especially in how force is justified or when is force justified. So the grand air trine, which is, the part with Mars, Pluto, and Uranus in this, air trines are ideas and speech, law, surveillance, justice, but the trine is not grounded unless it's tethered to the heart and to earth wisdom. So the grand trine in all of this represents smooth channels of rhetoric, of propaganda, of enforcement that are not necessarily true. It also is systemic overriding of consent via media narratives. Just because you say something doesn't make it true. Just because you say DC is lawless and homelessness is a problem and crime is sky high doesn't make it true because, the numbers show something different. It is technocratic authoritarianism, right? Pluto and Uranus and Mars in air, thought control plus enforced compliance, right? DC didn't have a choice in this. So here's the split, right? There's this split. There always is in a kite. Remember, I said that's an aha in the making that I had, right? This is splitting. This long, the the tail of the kite and the head of the kite create this opposition, and that opposition creates this kind of two-story kite, right? On one half, you know, in the whole, you have this opportunity for this amazing energy, but it's split in half, right? So all the parts don't see each other. And there's two different configurations going on here. And in that case, it makes it hard to, use all of the beneficial energies that should be here to their maximum. So we have Mars, Pluto, Uranus on one side, right? And that's control of the collective thought. It's militarized enforcement and these are the negative uh, parts of this, right? Surveillance, technocratic overreach, right? We've got overreach on one side. On the other side, we have Mars, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, and that is covert agendas and spiritual bypassing. Especially with leaders, right? They're just bypassing what they know to be true, what their higher self, their spirit would be, whispering in their ears. Radical reform, that's kind of cloaked in idealism, right? So this duality suggests that both sides of the ideological spectrum may feel they are justified in using force. And the truth and power are obscured in this fog of illusion, right? Neptune, illusion, and or distorted through tech and media with Uranus. So as we go through this, here's some of the angles that we could talk about in terms of this whole kite configuration in the USA chart. One, this move that Trump makes is a Martian move. It's Mars moving in light of Pluto's reign. Directing the National Guard is a Mars move, and it's overriding the local DC authority. It's also a Pluto move, right? Pluto. And it's an old Pluto power play. The USA Pluto's in Capricorn, the old Pluto power structure, right? And the power play happened through Libran energy, Mars, right? Energy, the sign of balance, but also of legal maneuvering and image based action. So we are not done with this story. This story is probably headed for the courts, right? And the courts then, Libran, in their very existence, will have something to say about all of this. And then we have Pluto conjunct the USA moon, not necessarily conjunct, but coming closer, right, to that conjunction with the moon. And that Pluto might be about psychological warfare, right, and transformation. The moon is the people, the masses, the conjunction eventually, that coming together eventually of these two big powerhouses in the chart, um, exposing buried truths and loss of security and potentially the empowerment that others will use through facing fear, or we become empowered by facing our fears, but fear is being used to manipulate us at this very moment. So we're rewriting the American story. This kite really just is amazing when you overlay the key axes of the USA chart. So we're watching this battle for the soul of this nation. Really, this is like this mythic battle. And with the moon Pluto hit triggering deep ancestral fear and revolutionary potential, right? So all of that gets buried in all of this. And Mars is the trigger. Mars was the trigger on, the date of the full moon. And Mars doesn't generate the energy. He activates the energy that's already there. So it's already seething. It's there, right? The power base, Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, it's already there. Mars just lights the match that starts the party, right? Or starts the explosion. Now, here's where the phoenix of reform comes into play. And this is the beauty part after the struggle. And the struggle's a long one, right? This is possibly a 10-year plus struggle. And this is when the sky itself cries for change, because we're living through what is a once in a lifetime celestial event where Pluto moving out of bounds for the next 10 years, off and on. usually from September to November every year, which encompasses the USA elections, and the fall period of time where our fears get highlighted in human design. Pluto will be out of bounds by declination, which is stretching far beyond. That means he's moving beyond the sun's reach, and he'll be in that state from September of 2025 to 2035. Long time, right? And this isn't just rare, it's mythic, because after he ends, he never goes back, at least not in the foreseeable timeline. Pluto does not go back into the high north declination or into the low south declination. He stays in the neutral zone, right, after this. And now, um, while he's out of bounds, he's not just stirring the pot, he is flipping over the cauldron, right? He's like flipping it all over, flipping the script, so to speak. And now, while Pluto is reaching out of bounds in Aquarius, we also see the powerful kite configuration and what its true impact is here, especially over the USA natal chart, because that's just the backdrop of the chart that I'm using. And it's centered around Pluto itself. And the kite marks this pivotal moment where these deep systemic energies need to change, where Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune newly in Aries, and Uranus newly in Gemini, and Mars activating for radical realignment. And together, these two cosmic events, the kite and the out of bounds Pluto, aren't just about change. This is not just, oh, yeah, I think I'll change the color I'm wearing or dye my hair a different color. This is a call to reform, it's a reckoning, and then a resurrection, right? So it's the phoenix, like that, dies in the flames and arises anew from the ashes. So the kite and the Pluto out of bounds are really this blueprint for breakdown, or is it breakthrough? It could be both. It might be both. So Pluto in Aquarius amplifies the kite's energy here, right? Whatever he touches, he amplifies, and he amplifies it for quite a while. And he's, in the out of bounds piece. So that means it's the stirring of the soul of the nation. It's the soul of the people. And, likely people, this is happening all around the world, but I'm just using this as the chart. Mars in Libra was the match that lit the fire, right? It's the sword. It's the, if you want to, the executioner, or he could be the peacekeeper with teeth, right? Peacekeeper with teeth. And its opposition to Saturn and Neptune and the kite, can force accountability for one's actions. Or does it invite repression disguised as salvation? Think about that, right? I'm going to come in, swoop in with the National Guard, and I'm going to save DC. But what you've really got there is a recipe for repression. We cannot allow this to happen, by the way. Saturn and Neptune in Aries represent the crumbling of false authority and the illusion of leadership, right? These people that are making these choices are parading as leaders. But as we've seen over the last couple of weeks with Leo energy, a true leader leads from the heart, leads from the will of the people they lead, not from authoritarian dictatorship. Now, Uranus in Gemini is this wild card of truth. He shakes up the media, he shakes up tech, he shakes up education, and disrupting the way we think, the way we speak, the way we connect. So we have this configuration that splits, right? And that offers two mirrored realities, one of control, manipulation, and suppression, or the other one of clarity, innovation, and spiritual awakening. And the tension between them, that's where the real story is unfolding, right? The tension between these two is where the story unfolds. And Pluto out of bounds is the power below the surface that is, the engine, right? That's moving this forward. And Pluto's the Lord of transformation and isn't just in Aquarius, he's rogue in Aquarius. So he's about to bring a can of whoop ass on anything that isn't power to the people. And from September 11th, especially through November 3rd this year, Pluto out of bounds will cross the USA moon and also the trigger of this whole configuration. This means power is no longer operating within normal rules. So likely we see the ugly side first, right? And we're seeing the rise of extremism at this moment, deep state control, even though they wanted to call previous governments in the US deep state control. We're seeing radical reform movements gearing up, all of this happening at once. But out of bounds also means access to a higher octave of truth, right? He's seeing from a higher perspective. He's seeing from outside of the illusion, outside of the paradigm. So to forces beyond the matrix of control. So he's seeing the bigger picture. This is where the phoenix metaphor really comes alive because we burn something, it must also be reborn, right? Burning down the house, we rebuild the house. So reform is the only way through this. And that's the buzzword of Pluto at this stage of the game. It is all about reform. So Pluto out of bounds doesn't ask for polite adjustments. Nope, 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 nope. It demands radical honesty, uncomfortable truths being paid attention to and brought to the surface, and actual accountability for one's actions. And juxtaposed with the kite, the tension and the flow kind of here, we're invited to a choice. Do we allow the immense energy to be channeled through outdated systems, repeating past abuses with new costumes on? Or do we ride the currents of discomfort at this time toward genuine reform, soul level and collective and structural reform? The phoenix rises not because it wants to, but because it must. And Pluto says, what will you do with the ashes? What will you create with the ashes of the old world? So imagine this in closing today. Imagine the USA's moon, the people, being pierced by Pluto's out of bounds shadow from below, and then being surrounded by this kite of cosmic tension, right? This isn't just politics. This isn't just about the politics. This is mythic. This is myth in motion. And it's the final scene of a bigger act, right? The final scene of this bigger thing that has been being, we're being forced through. And it's the first line of a brand new script, right? And are we brave enough to write the new script? Is the question for each one of us. All right. I know that I got a little bit melodramatic there, but hey, that's my jam. Um, so I know it's after 9 and I have to get out of here and you do too likely, but thank you so much for joining me. This is a conversation, a continuing conversation that we must have. We cannot hide our heads in the sand. We cannot be the ostrich, right? We have to come out and we have to say, we have to face it head on. We have to call it like we see it. If you're being authoritarian and a dictator to be, then those are the words that we need to use. And alongside that, we want to say what it is we want, which is democracy, a healthy democracy, where the people are empowered, not the politicians, right? Ah, anyway. So that's it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me, Janet at living-astrology.com. And have a great weekend, everybody. Bye for now.